My name is Sarah, and I'm 29 years old. For 3 years, I've been dreading our weekly family dinners. My twin sister Emma and older brother David always found ways to make jokes about my broke college lifestyle. They had no clue that my small tech startup had just been bought by Google for $80 million. I chose to keep living in my tiny apartment and riding the bus because money never meant showing off to me. Their mean comments about my worth were about to get a reality check today. The helicopter was just my way of saying hello. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments what country you're watching from. Smash that like button if you've ever been looked down on by your own family. What happens next will blow your mind completely. Growing up as the youngest of 3 kids was really hard. David, who's 35 now, always did everything perfectly according to our parents. He went to the best schools, got a fancy job at a big law firm, and bought a huge house in the richest part of town. His success stories were all we heard about at every family gathering. Emma, my twin, chose to marry rich instead of working. She found herself a doctor named Marcus, who comes from old money. Her wedding was in all the fancy magazines, and her life of shopping and fancy parties made our parents so proud of their perfect daughter. Then there was me, Sarah, the family disappointment who never fit in anywhere. While David was serious and traditional, and Emma was popular and perfect, I was always asking questions and wanting to do things differently. Our parents tried to treat us all the same, but it was clear early on that my brother and sister and I wanted completely different things from life. In high school, while David was class president and Emma was prom queen, I was in my bedroom teaching myself how to code and building simple apps for fun. My parents thought it was just a silly hobby that I would grow out of once I got serious about finding a husband or a normal job. When I told them I wanted to drop out of college to start my own company, everyone freaked out completely. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," my dad had shouted at me during a terrible dinner argument 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I left our small town of Millbrook with only $500 and a dream to prove that my way could work too. My family was sure I'd come crawling back home within 3 months, ready to admit they were right about everything. When I didn't come home, they made up their own story about what was happening to me. They decided I was failing but too embarrassed to ask for help. That my business ideas had crashed and burned, that I was probably living with 5 roommates in some gross apartment downtown. The truth was completely different from what they imagined. My journey had been super tough, but way more successful than they could ever dream of. After 2 failed app ideas and almost running out of money completely, my photo sharing app for small businesses finally took off with a feature that changed everything about social media marketing. 2 years of working every single day and eating nothing but cheap pasta eventually led to a company worth more than $50 million. 4 months ago, Google bought my company and made me richer than I ever thought possible in my whole life. But I never told my family any of this. Every holiday phone call and rare visit home, I listened to them talk about my struggling artist phase, without ever correcting them. When David asked if I needed money for rent or when Emma offered to buy me new clothes, I just said thank you and changed the subject quickly. It was easier than trying to explain why I chose to live simply even though I was successful. That I cared more about doing good things than buying expensive stuff, that I was secretly building computer labs in schools across the country instead of buying fancy cars. The phone call about Grandma came 5 weeks ago. She had gotten really sick with pneumonia, and Grandpa's health was getting worse every day. They needed more help and care than they could pay for with their small savings. David had called a family meeting to talk about what we should do and how much money everyone could give. His voice had that usual judgmental tone when he asked if I could somehow make it home and contribute whatever tiny amount I could manage. Now, as my plane started landing at the small airport near Millbrook, my stomach felt sick with worry. For years, I had stayed away from their judgment by building a life with friends who liked me for who I really was, not for what I owned. But family has a way of making even successful adults feel like little kids again. Should today be the day I finally told them the truth about my success? Or should I keep protecting myself from their shock, their weird reactions, and all the awkward questions about why I had kept it secret for so long? As the plane touched the ground, I still hadn't decided what to do. My grandparents needed help, and I had already secretly arranged for the best doctors and nurses money could buy. But my brother and sister had no idea, and this family meeting was going to be another session of them talking down to me. My hands gripped my old backpack tighter as I got ready to step back into the complicated mess of family expectations and judgments. The morning of my flight, I stood in front of my closet in my downtown apartment, carefully picking the most ordinary clothes I owned. I chose old jeans, a faded t-shirt with a tiny stain on the sleeve, and worn-out sneakers that looked like I'd had them forever. My assistant, Jake, watched with confusion as I packed similar simple outfits in an ancient duffel bag instead of my nice suitcase. "You're worth $80 million and you're dressing like someone who shops at thrift stores," he said, holding my usual travel folder. "And you're flying coach instead of taking the company helicopter because this is exactly how they expect me to show up," I replied, putting my hair in a messy ponytail. They have this picture in their heads of who I am, and I'm not ready to break that picture just yet. On the plane, I kept thinking about why I kept pretending to be poor. The truth was really complicated and hard to explain. Part of me liked that people underestimated me. In business meetings, I had learned that when people think you're not important, they tell you things they shouldn't, which helps me make better deals. With my family, their low expectations meant I never had to defend my choices or prove my success using their rules. But there was a deeper reason, one I barely admitted to myself. Their judgment had hurt me really badly. When I first left home, the way they dismissed my dreams cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Every mean comment about my computer phase. Every suggestion that I should just get married like Emma or get a real job like David had piled up into a protective wall I built around my true feelings. "Your problem, Sarah, is that you live in a fantasy world," my brother had said during our last Christmas together 3 years ago. "Some people are meant to be leaders. Others are meant to follow. There's nothing wrong with accepting what you're good at." That night, I had gone outside to hide my tears, pretending to check my phone while I tried not to cry. The crazy thing was that earlier that same day, I had signed a deal that brought my app to 10 new countries. My team had celebrated with champagne while I got ready to fly home and be treated like the family failure again. The taxi from the airport drove through the familiar streets of Millbrook. Downtown looked exactly the same as when I left. The same old bookstore my mom loved, the ice cream place where we celebrated birthdays. The park where I first got the idea for my app while watching people struggle to share photos from their phones. Everything felt smaller now, frozen in time while my world had grown bigger than I ever imagined. When the taxi stopped at my childhood home, I felt sad and nervous at the same time. The yellow house with white trim had a new fence, but everything else looked exactly the same. The big oak tree I used to climb was still there, and Mom's flower garden still lined the front walkway. For a moment, I was 8 years old again, running up those steps with a drawing or test paper, hoping for praise that never felt like enough. I paid the driver and took a deep breath before walking up the path I knew so well. Before I could even knock, the door flew open to show David wearing an expensive suit even though he was supposedly relaxing at home. "About time," he said, looking at his fancy watch. "We thought your bus broke down or something. Did you have trouble finding money for cab fare?" His eyes looked at my deliberately cheap clothes, and a small mean smile appeared on his face. "Good to see you too, David," I said, giving him a quick hug that felt stiff and uncomfortable. "How are Grandma and Grandpa doing?" "As well as you'd expect for people their age and their condition," he said, taking my old duffel bag with an expression that mixed pity and superiority. "I've been here since yesterday getting everything organized. Emma and Marcus will be here this afternoon. You're staying in your old room, naturally. We haven't changed anything up there." As I followed him inside, he kept talking without stopping. "You know, if you need help with expenses while you're here, just let me know. I realize taking time off from your projects must be hard financially." And there it was, the first of many reminders about how poor they thought I was. I could have corrected him right then, mentioned that my executive team was handling my schedule, or that money was the last thing I worried about. Instead, I just nodded and thanked him politely, playing the role they had written for me in our family story. Grandpa was sleeping in his chair in the living room, looking thinner than I remembered, with more gray in his beard. Grandma was in the kitchen, moving slowly because of her illness, but her face lit up when she saw me. "Sarah, my dear," she said, reaching out for a hug. "You look," she paused, trying to find something nice to say about my purposely plain appearance. "Healthy. Are you getting enough food with your budget? You know you can always call if you need help buying groceries." "I'm doing fine, Grandma," I promised her, helping her sit down. "Tell me how you're feeling. What do the doctors say?" As we talked about her health, I could feel David hovering nearby, jumping in with medical terms and treatment options he had researched online. He had already made a thick folder of nursing homes and home care services, complete with price lists and quality ratings. His organization was impressive, but it came with the assumption that he would be making all the decisions with very little input from me, the struggling baby sister, who could barely afford to help. "We'll go through everything step by step tomorrow," he said, closing the folder. "But I wanted you to have time to understand how serious and expensive this situation really is." His emphasis on expensive was intentional, a not-so-subtle reminder of what he thought were my financial limits. I nodded thoughtfully, knowing that my bank account already held more than enough to give my grandparents the best care possible for the rest of their lives, with millions left over. But tonight wasn't the right time for big revelations. I needed to see just how badly my siblings really thought of me before deciding what to do next. That evening, Grandma insisted on making dinner for everyone despite not feeling well. I offered to cook instead, but David had already ordered catering from an expensive restaurant. His way of showing that whatever I might make wouldn't be good enough. The food was definitely impressive: grilled salmon, fancy rice, steamed vegetables, and artisan bread that Grandma kept praising. "This must have cost a week's salary," she said, arranging everything on her best plates. "David, you're always so generous with your money." "It's nothing, Grandma," he replied with fake modesty. "The law firm had a great month. Besides, we should enjoy these family times while we still can." The doorbell rang just as we were setting the table. Emma walked in with her usual dramatic entrance, her husband Marcus following behind, carrying multiple shopping bags from expensive stores. My sister looked like she had stepped out of a magazine in her designer dress and pearl necklace, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite supposedly traveling all day. "We're here," she announced, carefully hugging Grandma. "And we brought presents for everyone." She started handing out packages: expensive whiskey for Grandpa, a silk scarf for Grandma, and a leather briefcase for David. When she got to me, her smile became less genuine. "And for you, Sarah, I thought you could use this." She gave me a smaller bag with a gift card to a discount clothing store. "I noticed last time that your wardrobe needs some help," she explained with what she probably thought was sisterly love. "This should help you get a few nice outfits for job interviews." "Thank you," I said calmly, putting the card in my pocket while ignoring the suggestion that I needed help finding work. "That's very thoughtful." "Well, we all want to see you succeed," she replied with a condescending pat on my shoulder. Speaking of success, Marcus just got promoted to head of surgery. We're celebrating by redoing our entire house. Marble countertops in every room. Dinner conversation was all about my siblings' achievements: David's latest big case, Emma's charity auction that raised thousands for the animal shelter, Marcus's golf tournament victory at their exclusive country club. When the conversation occasionally turned to me, it was always framed as gentle concern. "So, what about you, Sarah?" Emma asked, refilling her wine glass. "Any exciting news in your, what is it you do again?" "Technology stuff," I replied vaguely, helping myself to more vegetables. "Small business solutions. Still doing freelance work." "I know some people who might need basic websites," David interrupted. "Nothing major, but it could give you some steady income, more reliable than gig work." "I appreciate that," I said, swallowing my pride and the urge to mention that my gig work had recently sold for $80 million. Grandpa, who had been mostly quiet, suddenly looked directly at me. "Are you still in that tiny studio apartment? The one with the broken air conditioning?" That apartment had been 4 years and 2 moves ago. I now owned a penthouse with a view of the entire city. But they didn't need to know that yet. "I have a comfortable place," I answered honestly. "Well, Comfortable means different things to different people. Emma laughed. Remember when Sarah thought success meant being able to buy pizza instead of making sandwiches every night? As everyone chuckled at what they saw as my simple dreams, the conversation naturally moved to tomorrow's real purpose, our grandparents' care needs. The reality is, David began, switching into his lawyer presentation mode, that Grandma and Grandpa need more help than Medicare will cover. Their retirement money is decent, but not unlimited, especially considering the quality of care they deserve. We've been looking at several options, Emma added. There's a wonderful senior community near us, very exclusive, and we know the director personally. The medical facilities are top-notch. And the social environment would be perfect for them, Marcus contributed. Very refined, very safe. Throughout this discussion, I noticed how smoothly they used we, while occasionally glancing at me with looks that clearly left me out of the important decision-making. The message was crystal clear. They were the successful ones who would handle the big decisions and financial arrangements. I was expected to contribute my tiny amount and be grateful they weren't asking for more. Of course, these premium facilities come with premium price tags, David continued, directing this comment specifically at me. But Emma and I have talked about how we'll handle the financial side of things. We want to be fair about everyone's contributions, Emma added with fake sweetness. Everyone should pay according to what they can afford, which means we don't expect you to match what we're putting in, David clarified, as if he was doing me a huge favor. Whatever small amount you can manage will be appreciated, even something symbolic. I felt my face getting hot with a mix of anger and embarrassment, not because I couldn't contribute, but because they had so completely written me off without ever asking about my real situation. Years of assumptions and judgments had created a story about me that they accepted as absolute truth. You've always had so much potential, Sarah, Grandma sighed, patting my hand. I still don't understand why you never finished college. You could have been so successful like your brother. Different paths work for different people, Grandma, I replied quietly. Not everyone measures success the same way. True, David nodded condescendingly. But some measures of success are more real than others. Financial security, stability, the ability to take care of family. These are universal signs that someone's choices have been smart. As the subtle insults continued throughout dinner, I kept my cool while internally debating my next move. Part of me wanted to reveal everything right then and there, to see their faces when they realized how completely wrong they had been about me all these years. But another part hesitated, wanting to understand the full scope of their assumptions before changing our family dynamic forever. By the time dessert was served, I had made my decision. Tomorrow's family meeting would be the moment when they learned that their struggling baby sister had been more successful than they could possibly imagine, just not in the ways they had demanded. The official family meeting started exactly at 10 the next morning in Grandma and Grandpa's living room. David had set up his laptop and a small projector to show his carefully prepared PowerPoint presentation titled Senior Care Options and Cost Analysis. Emma and Marcus sat on the couch, both dressed like they were going to a business meeting, while our grandparents sat in their usual recliners. I took the wobbly footstool in the corner, the least comfortable seat available, which seemed perfect for my assigned role as the family afterthought. I've put together detailed research on the top care facilities in the area, David began, clicking through slides of beautiful buildings with perfect lawns and elegant interiors. These 3 meet our requirements for quality medical care, social activities, and closeness to family. Each facility, he showed, was more luxurious than the last, with prices to match. He explained amenities like gourmet dining rooms, cultural field trips, and specialized memory care programs for Grandpa. The final option, clearly his favorite, was a brand new continuing care community with individual apartments that could transition to higher levels of medical support as needed. This would allow Grandma and Grandpa to keep their independence while having immediate access to medical help, he explained. They would have a 1-bedroom unit with a small patio garden. The grounds include nature trails, an activity center, and even a putting green for Grandpa. It looks wonderful, Grandma murmured, though I noticed the worry in her eyes as she looked at Grandpa, who seemed confused by the fast presentation. Naturally, premium care comes with premium costs, David continued, moving to a slide with detailed monthly expenses. The final number made Grandma gasp quietly. This represents the gap between their retirement income and the actual costs. This is what we as a family need to cover. Marcus, always thinking like a banker, leaned forward. We've calculated how to split this responsibility fairly. Emma and I can handle 35%. And I can manage 50% through my bonus structure and investment portfolio, David added. That leaves 15%, which works out to roughly $800 monthly. All eyes turned to me. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air. Could I even afford my relatively small portion? I stayed silent, curious how they would express their assumptions about my finances. Emma cleared her throat delicately. Sarah, we understand your situation is different from ours. If that amount is too much, maybe you could help in other ways. Perhaps visit more often to provide hands-on care instead. We don't want to create financial hardship, David added with a patronizing tone he saved especially for me. Maybe $300 monthly would be more realistic for your budget. Emma and I could adjust our contributions to cover the difference. How generous of you, I said quietly, noting how they had already decided what I could and couldn't afford without ever asking me directly. We just want what's best for Grandma and Grandpa, Emma said, her voice carrying defensive undertones. Those of us who can contribute more should step up. Grandpa, who had been quiet throughout the presentation, suddenly focused on me with clear eyes. Do you even have a real job right now, Sarah? Last time we talked, you said you were between projects. Before I could answer, David jumped in. Actually, I've been meaning to bring this up. My firm has an entry-level paralegal position opening. The salary would be modest by our standards, but for someone in Sarah's situation, it would provide stability and health benefits. I could recommend you. That's so thoughtful. Emma beamed at our brother. A real job with a real company would make such a difference for you, Sarah. The condescension was becoming unbearable. They had created such a complete story about my supposed failures that they couldn't even imagine I might have succeeded on my own terms. I appreciate the thought, I said carefully, but I'm satisfied with my current professional situation. David exchanged a knowing look with Emma. Being satisfied and being secure are two different things, Sarah. At some point, you need to think practically. You can't do temporary work and live paycheck to paycheck forever. Paycheck to paycheck? I repeated, genuinely puzzled. Well, you mentioned having financial stress last time we spoke, Emma said. And you never invite any of us to visit, which suggests your living situation might be unstable. I had never mentioned financial stress. What I had said was that I was reinvesting profits back into expanding my business. And I had never invited them because their judgment made visits unpleasant. I don't live paycheck to paycheck, I stated firmly. I have a stable financial situation, but not stable enough to afford reliable transportation, right? David pressed. I noticed you took a taxi from the airport instead of driving. Do you even own a car anymore? The conversation had entered territory so removed from reality that I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I simply said, I have transportation that works for me. Sarah has always been our creative type, Grandma said, clearly trying to ease the tension. Not everyone needs material things to be happy. That's a nice philosophy when material success seems impossible to achieve, David muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. That comment was the breaking point. 10 years of condescension and judgment crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. They were never going to see me accurately unless I forced them to confront their misconceptions head-on. Let's get back to the main issue, Marcus suggested, oblivious to the rising tension. Can you handle the $300 per month, Sarah? We really need to finalize these numbers today. I need to make a quick phone call first, I said, pulling out my cell phone. It'll just take a second. Now really isn't the time for personal calls, David said with irritation. We're in the middle of important family business. I ignored him and dialed my assistant Jake's number. Hey, it's me. Is everything ready for today? I paused, listening. Perfect. Go ahead with the pickup in 10 minutes. Yes, the front yard is big enough. Thanks. I ended the call and turned back to my confused family.
Sorry about that.
Just confirming my ride home. Did you call another taxi? Done here, David said with growing irritation. Not exactly a taxi, I replied, settling back onto my seat. Now about those care options. I actually have another facility to suggest. It opened 6 months ago, about 15 minutes from here. It has an outstanding memory care program and has been nationally recognized for its innovative approach. I researched every quality facility within a 100-mile radius, David said dismissively. If it were worth considering, it would be in my presentation. This one is quite exclusive, I continued calmly. They only accept residents through their private foundation. No public advertising. And how exactly would you know about an exclusive, unlisted care facility? Emma asked with a laugh. I smiled slightly. I know because I created it. The Sunrise Senior Wellness Foundation is my project. A stunned silence filled the room. David recovered first. What do you mean your project? You can't possibly be suggesting you have the resources to create a healthcare facility. That's exactly what I'm suggesting, I replied. This is absurd, he scoffed. Next you'll tell us you own a private jet and a mansion. No jet, I said with a small smile. But I do have the helicopter. Sarah, if this is some kind of joke, it's not funny, Emma said sharply. We're trying to have a serious conversation about our grandparents' future. I promise you, I'm being completely serious, I replied. Right. David laughed mockingly. The same sister who can't even afford a car suddenly owns a healthcare foundation. That makes perfect sense. Just as he finished speaking, the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors cutting through the morning air became audible, growing louder by the second. My family's conversation stopped as the noise became impossible to ignore. What in the world? Grandma exclaimed, moving toward the window. Outside, a sleek silver helicopter was descending onto their spacious backyard. The wind from its blades bent the grass and shook the branches of nearby trees. Are they allowed to land here? Emma asked in alarm. Should we call the police? I calmly gathered my things and stood up. No need to call anyone. That's for me. 5 pairs of eyes stared at me in complete bewilderment. What do you mean for you? David demanded. What's going on, Sarah? I walked to the back door and turned to face my family. I believe your exact words were that I can't even afford a car, I said evenly. You were right. I don't own a car. I opened the door as the helicopter settled onto the lawn and its engines began to quiet. The pilot, dressed in a professional uniform, gave me a friendly wave. My ride's here, I announced simply. Grandma's face went completely white before she slowly sank back into her chair in a dead faint. Grandpa stood frozen with his mouth wide open. Emma grabbed Marcus's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white, while David looked like someone had just told him gravity worked backwards. Before stepping outside, I turned back one final time. When Grandma wakes up, tell her I'll be back in 30 minutes. I think we should continue this conversation at my place. The helicopter can take all of us. As the helicopter lifted off with me inside, I caught a glimpse of my family still standing in the doorway, their expressions a mixture of shock, confusion, and complete disbelief. The pilot handed me a headset to block out the noise, and I sank back into the leather seat, finally allowing myself to process what had just happened. Everything okay, Miss Chin? The pilot asked. You seem stressed. Just family drama, Tom, I replied, watching my childhood neighborhood grow smaller below us. You know how families can be. Yes, ma'am. Should I do a scenic loop to give them more time to process? He asked with a hint of amusement. I laughed, feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders. Tempting, but let's head straight to the house. We'll be bringing them all back with us in a few minutes. The helicopter banked smoothly toward the forested hills outside town where my recently purchased estate was located. I had bought the 40-acre property 4 months ago when I decided to establish a West Coast branch office closer to my hometown. The main house was a restored Victorian mansion with 8 bedrooms, state-of-the-art technology seamlessly integrated into its historic charm. The grounds featured formal gardens, a small vineyard, and a freshly built helicopter landing pad. It was definitely extravagant, but also a long-term investment in rebuilding connections with my roots on my own terms. Below us, I could see the estate coming into view, The sprawling main house with its wraparound porch, the meticulously maintained grounds, and the guest cottage where my staff lived. It was beautiful, but also somewhat overwhelming, which was exactly why I had hesitated to reveal it to my family. How could I explain that despite this outward show of wealth, I still valued simplicity and purpose over status symbols? As we landed on the helipad, I saw Jake waiting with his tablet, ready to update me on the morning schedule. He had been with me since the beginning of my company, one of the few people who understood both my professional and personal worlds completely. "How did the big reveal go?" he asked as I approached, handing me a bottle of sparkling water. "About as expected," I replied. "Grandma fainted. The rest looked like they'd seen aliens land. We'll be bringing them here in about 20 minutes, so please make sure everything is set up." "Already taken care of," he assured me. "Chef Maria has prepared brunch. The East Wing guest suites are ready if they decide to stay, and I've put together the family documentation packet you requested." The family packet contained proof of the care arrangements I had already been quietly establishing for my grandparents, the foundation I had started that operated the Senior Wellness Center, the trust fund to cover all their future medical expenses, and the legal structure that would guarantee they received excellent care regardless of how family relationships developed. "Thank you, Jake. I don't know what I'd do without you. Probably start another tech company out of sheer boredom," he joked. Speaking of which, the London team sent the proposal for the new AI security system. "They need your approval by Thursday." "I'll review it tonight," I promised, but family comes first today, complicated as it may be. 20 minutes later, Tom radioed that he was approaching my grandparents' house. I took a deep breath, preparing for the next phase of this revelation. Part of me regretted the dramatic helicopter entrance, but after years of dismissal and condescension, maybe a dramatic gesture was exactly what was needed to shatter their preconceptions. When the helicopter returned, my entire family was aboard, their expressions still completely stunned. Grandma clutched her purse like a life preserver, Grandpa gazed out the window in amazement, and my siblings maintained a shocked silence that was totally unlike them. Only Marcus seemed to have partially recovered, his financial mind probably already calculating the value of what he was witnessing. As we landed and they climbed out, the full impact of the estate came into view. Emma's mouth literally fell open while David kept blinking rapidly as if trying to wake himself from a dream. "Welcome to my home," I said simply, leading them toward the main entrance where Jake waited with a professional smile. "This is yours," Grandma finally managed to ask as we entered the grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and sparkling chandelier. "Yes, Grandma. I bought it 4 months ago when I decided to establish a regional office nearby." "Regional office for what?" David demanded, finding his voice at last. I led them into the main sitting room, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens and vineyard beyond. "For Chun Digital Solutions, my company," I gestured for them to sit on the comfortable sofas arranged around a glass coffee table. "Your company?" he repeated flatly. "Since when do you have a company? And how could you possibly afford all this?" "I founded CDS 6 years ago," I explained calmly. "We specialize in AI-powered photo management solutions for small businesses. 4 months ago, we were acquired by Google for just over $80 million. I retained creative control of the division and significant stock options in the parent company." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Emma looked like she might follow Grandma's example and faint, while David had gone completely pale beneath his expensive tan. $80 million? Grandpa repeated slowly, his eyes clearer than they'd been all weekend. "My Sarah?" "Yes, Grandpa," I said gently, moving to sit beside him. "You're Sarah." But you never said anything," Grandma stammered. "All these years we thought. You thought I was struggling." I finished for her. "I know. I never corrected that assumption. Why would you let us believe you were barely surviving?" Emma demanded, finding her voice at last. "Do you have any idea how worried we were about you?" I raised an eyebrow at her. "Were you worried, Emma? Or was it more convenient to believe I had failed? You gave me a gift card for discount clothes yesterday. You literally offered to help me find a job." She had the decency to look embarrassed. "I was trying to help." "No," I said firmly. "You were trying to maintain the story that made sense to you, that the sister who chose a different path must necessarily be failing. It never occurred to any of you that I might succeed on my own terms. You could have told us, David said, anger creeping into his voice. Instead, you let us make complete fools of ourselves. I didn't create your assumptions, I replied evenly. You did that entirely on your own. Every time I tried to discuss my work, you changed the subject or dismissed it as, that computer hobby Sarah does. You never asked real questions about my business or my life. But the old clothes, the taxi from the airport, Grandma began, were choices, I finished. I live simply by preference, not necessity. I take taxis because I prefer them to dealing with rental cars when I travel. None of that means I can't afford better. It means material displays aren't how I define success. Marcus, ever practical, spoke up for the first time. So that care facility you mentioned, the Sunrise Foundation, that's really yours? I nodded and gestured to Jake, who brought over the family documentation packet. Yes. After my first major funding round 2 years ago, I established the foundation. It operates a cutting-edge wellness community specializing in memory care and holistic senior support. I had already arranged for Grandma and Grandpa to have a place there whenever they're ready. I opened the packet and began showing them the paperwork, the trust established in our grandparents' names, the healthcare provisions, the legal framework that would protect their future regardless of any family disagreements. You did all this without telling us? David asked, his voice mixing amazement and lingering anger. I did all this because I love them, I corrected. And yes, without telling you, because I knew exactly what would happen. You would question my decisions, try to take control of the process, and ultimately make me prove myself worthy of having a voice in our grandparents' care. Today's meeting proved exactly that. Grandma wiped away tears. We never meant to make you feel excluded, Sarah. Maybe not intentionally, I acknowledged. But every gift card for basic necessities, every offer of an entry-level job at David's firm, every condescending comment about my potential sent a clear message that you believed I had failed and needed rescuing. We were trying to help, Emma insisted. Were you? Or were you trying to validate your own choices by making mine the cautionary tale? The family disappointment who couldn't succeed without following your approved path. My words hung in the air, uncomfortable but truthful. For the first time, my siblings seemed to be genuinely thinking about their behavior rather than defending it. Grandpa reached over and took my hand, his eyes more focused than they'd been all day. I always knew you were special, Sarah. Different, yes, but special in a good way. I just didn't understand what you were building. Thank you, Grandpa, I said softly, squeezing his hand. That means everything to me. Jake quietly signaled that brunch was ready, and I invited everyone to move to the dining room. As we settled around the table set with elegant china and fresh flowers from the garden, the initial shock began to transform into curiosity. Grandma wanted to know about my penthouse in the city. Emma asked about my business travels, and even David began asking more thoughtful questions about how I had built my company from nothing. For the first time in years, they were seeing me, really seeing me, not as the failing baby sister, but as a successful entrepreneur who had created something meaningful on her own terms. The helicopter had gotten their attention, but it was this moment of genuine interest in my actual life that felt like the real breakthrough. After brunch, I gave my family a complete tour of the estate. The property included the main house, guest cottages, and a newly built office complex where a small team would soon be working on West Coast projects. As we walked the grounds, the initial tension gradually melted into a more complex mix of emotions, lingering embarrassment from my siblings, pride from my grandparents, and my own sense of relief at finally being completely honest with my family. In the garden overlooking the vineyard, we settled onto outdoor furniture for coffee and deeper conversation. The questions came more naturally now, with genuine curiosity replacing judgment. When did you know your company would really make it? Grandpa asked, his attention more sustained than it had been all weekend. Despite his memory issues, his interest in my work seemed to anchor him in the present moment. There wasn't one magic moment, I explained. We almost went bankrupt twice in the first 2 years. I lived in a studio apartment with paper-thin walls and worked every single day without breaks. But in year 3, we developed an AI algorithm that revolutionized how small businesses manage their online photos. That changed everything. Why didn't you ask for help during those difficult times? Grandma wondered. We would have supported you. With conditions, I said gently. Every offer of help came with the expectation that I would admit my path was wrong. I needed to prove to myself that it wasn't. David, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. I owe you a huge apology, Sarah. I made assumptions about your choices that said more about my own fears than your abilities. The admission surprised me. My brother rarely acknowledged being wrong about anything. What do you mean your fears? I asked. He sighed, setting down his coffee cup. I followed the path that was laid out for me. Prestigious law school, corporate partnership track, country club membership. I did everything right, according to our family's definition of success. He paused, looking out over the vineyard. And I'm miserable at least half the time. I hate most of my clients. The politics at the firm are toxic, and I haven't felt genuinely excited about my work in years. David, Grandma exclaimed, you never mentioned any of this. Because admitting dissatisfaction would mean admitting I might have chosen poorly, he explained. So when Sarah chose a completely different route, I needed her to fail to justify my choices. Her success challenges everything I built my identity around. His honesty opened the door for Emma, who had been quietly twisting her wedding ring. I feel exactly the same way, she admitted softly. My life looks perfect on social media, but Marcus and I have been seeing a marriage counselor for 6 months. All those charity events and country club activities feel meaningless sometimes. Marcus nodded supportively, taking her hand. We've been questioning what really matters to us. The big house and social status came with costs we didn't anticipate. This vulnerability for my siblings was completely unexpected and deeply touching. For years, I had imagined them as perfectly satisfied with their conventional success, judging me from positions of smug certainty. The reality that they too had doubts and regrets opened up new possibilities for genuine connection. Why did you keep your success hidden for so long? Grandpa asked. Were you punishing us for not believing in you? The question stung with its accuracy. Part of me had definitely enjoyed the fantasy of a dramatic revelation that would force them to recognize how wrong they'd been about me. But seeing their actual shock and hurt had been less satisfying than I'd imagined. Initially, I stayed quiet because I wasn't sure the success would last, I admitted. Later, it became a habit, a form of emotional protection. And yes, maybe there was part of me that wanted to prove everyone wrong in a spectacular way. That was petty, and I regret it now. The helicopter entrance was definitely dramatic, Emma said with a small smile. I laughed, acknowledging the truth in her observation. Not my most mature moment, I agreed. But after David's comment about not even being able to afford a car, something inside me just snapped. I completely deserved that, he admitted. Though Grandma fainting was a bit concerning. I was overwhelmed. Grandma defended herself. Finding out your granddaughter is worth $80 million tends to come as quite a shock. Multi-millionaire, Marcus corrected automatically, then looked embarrassed when we all stared at him. Sorry, occupational hazard. The conversation naturally shifted to our grandparents' care, this time with me fully included as an equal partner in the discussion. I explained the Sunrise Foundation's approach to senior wellness, particularly for dementia patients like Grandpa. Rather than the institutional model David had researched, Sunrise offered small, home-like residences with personalized care plans and an emphasis on maintaining dignity and independence as long as possible. The foundation has already established a comprehensive trust to cover all expenses, I explained, addressing the financial concerns that had dominated the earlier meeting. But this isn't about me taking control of the decisions. It's about all of us working together as equals to find the best solution. Equals, David repeated thoughtfully. That's going to require some serious adjustment in my thinking. Mine too, I acknowledged. I've been defining myself in opposition to all of you for so long. I'm not sure I remember how to just be a sister and granddaughter without that defensive edge. As the afternoon continued, we began reconstructing our family dynamic on this new foundation of honesty. The process was awkward at times, with old patterns of interaction reasserting themselves, but the willingness to try was evident on all sides. Our grandparents watched their adult grandchildren with a mixture of concern and hope, occasionally sharing memories from our childhood that highlighted moments of connection we had all forgotten. When evening approached, I invited everyone to stay overnight in the guest rooms, an offer they accepted with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Emma was clearly excited to experience the luxury accommodations, while David seemed relieved not to have to process everything while driving back to town. Our grandparents were simply happy to have all their grandchildren under one roof, something that hadn't happened in years. Over dinner, prepared by my personal chef, we continued building bridges across the years of misunderstanding. There were challenging moments. Emma's hurt about being excluded from my real life, David's lingering defensiveness about his career choices, our grandparents' regret about not supporting my entrepreneurial dreams more fully. But there were also moments of real connection and even laughter as we shared stories from our separate lives. So, you really flew to Singapore for just one day to meet with investors? Emma asked incredulously. I can't imagine having that kind of freedom. It wasn't as glamorous as it sounds, I assured her. I was so jet-lagged I ordered breakfast at a dinner meeting and nearly fell asleep during my own presentation. Still, she sighed, your life sounds exciting. Parts of it are, I acknowledged. Other parts are routine and sometimes lonely. Success creates opportunities, but also isolation. There are trade-offs with every choice we make. I think that's what I'm finally starting to understand, David said thoughtfully. There's no perfect path that guarantees happiness. We all just make the best decisions we can with the information we have. As we finished dinner and moved to the living room for dessert, I realized something fundamental had shifted in our family relationships. The hierarchies and judgments that had defined our interactions for so long weren't completely gone, but they had been seriously disrupted. In their place was something tentative but promising, a more authentic connection based on who we actually were rather than who we pretended to be. When Grandma accidentally spilled her tea on the expensive rug, her immediate panic revealed how much she still saw herself as a guest in my world rather than family. I'm so sorry, she gasped. That carpet probably costs more than our monthly budget. It's just a rug, Grandma, I said gently. Things can be replaced. This honest conversation we're having, this real connection we're building, that's what's irreplaceable. Later, as everyone settled into their rooms for the night, I stood on the back patio, looking out at the moonlight reflecting off the vineyard. David joined me, offering a glass of wine from my collection. You've built something remarkable here, little sister, he said with genuine admiration. Not just the money and all this, he gestured at the estate, but creating something meaningful on your own terms. That takes real courage. I'm not sure I have that kind of bravery. It's never too late to make changes, I told him. If you're miserable half the time, that's actually not terrible odds for most people, but you could definitely aim higher. He laughed softly. Always the optimist. Some things never change. Some things shouldn't change, I agreed, raising my glass to toast new beginnings. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my family drama. Have any of you experienced something similar with your relatives? Drop a comment below and share your story. If this video resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Her Revenge for more real-life stories. Remember to share this with someone who needs to hear that success comes in many different forms. Thanks for watching, and remember, true wealth is measured in authentic relationships, not just bank accounts.